Hey guys, so we're going to go ahead and attempt to model this thing. And whenever you're looking at something like this, it's a pattern, right? So you need to identify the pattern where it starts and stops. So you're looking maybe for high points, low points, and then trying to trace out the lines and seeing what it's doing. And this could take a little bit of time to just kind of figure out what's going on here. And as you trace it out, you suddenly realize this isn't as simple as it seemed, because there's like an offset to the highs and lows, and it looks like 3 strands when it's actually 2. So like, what's going on here, right? Whenever you run into that issue, just look for something identifiable in the pattern on where it starts and stops. And you'll notice that this is the pattern here. So we have to potentially just model this, and we will end up modeling 3 parts. So even though it's 2 strands, right? So let's go ahead and do that. Let's jump into Blender. And we'll go over there real quick. We will jump into a side view of some sort. In this case, the front view. So hold Alt while orbiting. We can do image reference. Shift A to create image reference, and we'll go ahead and do that image there. So we're going to actually just model off of it, basically. So let's get into this. I'm going to create a mesh plane. Go into edit mode, hit AM, merge at center, so I have a single vertex. I rely off these things pretty heavily when it comes to just trying to figure out what's going on here. I'm just going to model what I see, not what I think it is. So I make an edge here. And so I can just start extruding vertices down if I wanted to, right? Just getting this thing going until I get to the other stopping point, which happens to be over here with that other like feature. So now we could extrude these all like that, but there's another option. You can always take an edge and just duplicate it all the way through. And you can see that the size is changing on the object as well. So that kind of complicates this a little bit more. It's a little hard to see. Let me turn a little opacity on. That doesn't make it much better, does it? Anyways. All right, anyway, so we'll get through this. I'm just going to line it up to what I see, not think too heavily about it. There's a little fluctuation in the shapes here, and that's more than likely caused by how this thing is put together. It's a little bit twisted, so that it's not all perfectly flat, obviously. And there might be some perspective from the image being taken. All right, but when we model that out, we'll push the reference back so we can see it a little better. All you'd have to do is select these and press F between them and fill them like so, right? And so the normals are backwards. If you don't see backwards normals, you can do backface colon over here, turn that on. Alt and you can flip it. And so we have that one going now. I'm going to borrow this edge, pull it down here. A little hard to tell where it's going, so let's just grab the vertices, start moving them around. And we want to line these edges up because we're going to deform this thing. And so having them even is quite useful. You see, we can kind of just start lining all these different edges up. We're just crossing the geometry for now. And it's not a big deal. We'll figure all this out a little bit later on. We got to do the same thing for the bottom down here as well. So you can see we can take the whole segment and just extrude it. Another way of going about doing that, right? There's no right and wrong answers here necessarily. We do want the normals facing the right way though, so we Alt and flip those. Having it all as one object can sometimes be hard to work with as well, but for the most part, you can see it's about correct with each other. Like they have about the same amount of edges, and they should. That's what you want. Okay, so it'll deform better, hopefully. So we have kind of this center point might be a nice place to have another edge. But we got kind of like 2 on the left and 1 on the right. I don't know if I care for that, so I'm going to GG twice these all over, and I'm going to add loop cuts real quick in these other sections if possible. I think I just had that one. There we go. It's a little bit more even, a little bit more balanced, right? Okay, so we do have this pattern on here that's, it looks kind of cylindrical in nature, and the reason why is because if you look closely, there's actually gaps in this thing. It's not all perfect. So these are something like wires that get coated with additional material here. In this case, it could be silver. It looks like it might be silver, so. But it's probably a bunch of wires that just get kind of wrapped up around on each other and then maybe like hot dipped or something like that. I don't know what's going on with it, but because of that reason, there are like gaps in here where maybe there was air bubbles or something. Who knows? So we got that kind of going. Now what we can do is we can start to push these things in and out of existence a little bit. I like to just move them forward and backwards real quick, just to get an idea of what I'm doing here, like what's going to be in front of one another, what's not. So we can kind of make this happen, basically. And when you move one of these on the edge, you have to keep in mind that this is feeding into another face somewhere, so you have to move that one possibly as well at the same time. That's what's going to complicate this process. And also, since we're going to go ahead and do it like this, where we're pushing things forward and backwards, we run into a potential issue here where if we had the pattern on it, it would be more complicated to work with, but also these twist slightly. So it's kind of one of them things where it becomes, as you dive into a project like this, you realize it becomes a little bit more complicated than you anticipated. You're going to have to do a little bit more, perhaps. Because you can see, like, these two are just intersecting each other. And also, we're going to have to work. You just use an Alt-Z to turn that on and off, by the way. But we're going to have to figure out just how to make these twists just right and work with each other, basically. And then line up so that it's seamless. So that's actually not as hard as you probably think. So you can see, like, this one goes up here, and then it dives back down through the pattern. So these two, obviously, are going to be lined up. So you can use machine tools and do Alt-A and align top, align left, or whatever the case there if you need to. Start doing some things like that. But when we go to create that pattern, it's going to be a little bit tricky to create it. Now, in some situations, the pattern might be more complicated than this, and it won't be this simple, right? And that's where you're going to switch to probably using something like displacement maps and using UVs to control the displacement of the more intricate pattern. So you might do the pattern modeling separately, bake out a height map or displacement map, and then work that into it. Now, I used to seamlessly sculpt things here in Blender, but as of late, I've been having issues with that, and it's not been working quite the way I would like. So that's kind of off the table for the time being. Later on, maybe some Blender updates will change that again so it works better. But I do want to kind of just shift these things around and get them more precise-like anyway. So, all right, so let's go ahead and just test the array real quick, because we're going to wrap this up with simple bin or simple deform. And you can see a lot of our pieces they're simply not lined up right now at all. And it's not quite the right shapes or anything yet. But so you can see this one's going to need to be moved down in alignment with this one over here. So we can take those two top points and align them real quick. Take this bottom point and this bottom point and align those one way or another. Okay. We will worry about left and right alignment later on. Just worried about the height for now. You can see these two can go together. This one back here that probably needs to go together. It's kind of weird. You got to select on the original, not the not on this right side on everything. So you get used to doing this after a little while. It's not too bad. You can see these two here. They might be aligned correct in the top, up and down, but we got to do left and right as well. So we got to go ahead and do that. All right, so when you get it about correct, you can turn the array off for just a moment. You select everything on the right side here, Alt-A, align right. Select everything here on the left side, Alt-A, align left. We could do a number like that, okay? And so if we wanted to, you'll see that the array is now working, at least. It's not pretty, but it's working. And so that's the name of the game here, really. Like, you just have to go through this project and make tweaks and adjustments as you see fit to get it just looking just right anyways. And that's easier said than done. It's actually pretty challenging in my opinion. I would probably spend just a minute just trying to get the patterns correct, but you know, you can spend however much time you want on it basically. And when you start to find little issues here or there, like we can realign those perhaps, so they're just straight up and down, make sure it's all good. We want to make certain things thicker. If you want to twist these at this point, you can also start doing that possibly. I'm going to wait for that though, because I'm going to show you another way I like to kind of twist things up. So for the most part, this looks about correct to me. So when you subdivide this later on, you'll check keep corners more than likely. You need to use it on just the pattern. you'll see like some things are just a little bit rough. This is kind of a critical area, in my opinion, that you want to get just right, like these high and low points. All right, but we can see that's going to start working out basically. All right, so where do we go from here? This is where you can easily start making mistakes. So personally, what I would do is I would just duplicate this and then hide it so that we have it for later on if needed. So Shift D, duplicate it, hide it. So in case you screw up, you can always go back to that point because we're already pretty far ahead in this process now, right? So you could save it out and say, this is whatever this ring thing is. So with that out of the way, we can try doing something like taking all of this and extruding it backwards, pressing E and Y, pressing A, Alt N, and recalculating outside. So we have these lined up like so. We can delete these end caps. Okay. And then we can add that subdivision to it. We'll see it's doing numbers like this now, which is kind of what I want. Also, we can still add the array, put the array before the subdivision, check merge. Make sure you don't have end caps, which I didn't apparently delete that one or this one, I don't think. Let's turn these off a second. I think there's one down here still. Oh, maybe not. Maybe there is not. All right, so we're good. So you can start to see the pattern coming to life at least a little bit. But it's still not very well controlled, right? Like there's just certain things we might want to tweak on it, like the position, just to get it all just right before we start trying to do the additional pattern of it with the little segments there. So how do we work with that possibly? Well, you could turn these off, maybe keep subdivision on actually. And we can go into sculpt mode. In sculpt mode, you can initialize face sets by loose parts. So now you have face sets to work with, and we can use something like the grab tool, and we can set auto masking for face sets, and we want to keep the mesh boundary where it's at. Don't move the mesh boundary. Also, you don't really want to fluctuate these too much left and right. So we can go up here and we can lock, in this case, you can see it's the x-axis. We can lock the x-axis, and now we can only work up and down and in and out basically. So we can actually add twists with the grab tool. And this works out quite well. You could do this with a solidify modifier possibly, where you don't have to actually extrude it first. You could just solidify it perhaps. So that could be quite useful to you. If you ever need to just work on one and something's kind of hiding the other one, you just press H on the face set you need and just work with it for a second and then pull it back. Keep going with it like that. So you can see we get a much finer control now with the grab tool as opposed. It's like proportional edit, but it's just I think a little bit more flexible, but you can see we can actually just start kind of pulling these things where we need them, whether it's the top segments or the bottom segments or whatever. And we're not messing up the borders at this point, so this works out quite well. And I've been getting used to using these sculpt tools a little bit more just for general modeling purposes because they seem to work out really well, especially with face sets every now and then like this. So let's see what that does if I move that like that. It does okay. Because this one I think I'll move out further actually. It can be a little hard to grab through these things sometimes, so you gotta kind of just finesse them just right, and then eventually they'll work out. You see? And I'm using a tablet, of course, to do this, but I don't think that's required. You can use a mouse tool. No problem. This is going to give that illusion of those twists a little bit. And so you probably won't ever get this perfectly correct. I'd have to venture a guess. It's going to be rather hard to do unless you had like a flat out pattern in front of you, like that was perfectly drawn or illustrated or whatever. That might work out a little bit better, but working from a photograph like that, I don't think you'll get it perfect. So this bottom one, I still want to kind of pull around a little bit. All right, yeah, so at this point, you're free to finesse this as much as you need to until it gets to exactly what you want it to be. Fortunately for us, like we moved all this stuff around, but we're going to have a little bit of an issue with it. As we shift things around, sometimes we lose kind of the alignment here for these loop cuts. So we need 3 loop cuts per, right? And if we do that, see if it arrays. That's the main thing. If it arrays, we're good. Okay, sometimes you can lose that alignment and that becomes a problem. We also have to do the backside here as well. So go ahead and Do the back side, 3, there, 3. You have to start shifting those around. You got to be careful. You got to, move both ends basically. All right, so after we make all of these, I'm just going to select all of them, front and back, holding Alt Shift, selecting through the whole area. What this is going to allow me to do is just bevel all these like so. So one segment, just bevel it. Now you can loop select these areas like this. Okay, Alt and Shift clicking. And what you want to do is you want to extrude these out on Y. Okay, so you just extrude them out like so. And that's going to give you the kind of topology you're looking for the most part. We'll have to clean it up a bit, but it's really not that bad of a process. I'm doing these particular pieces like this. So you can see we're going to E and Y, extrude it out a bit. So we have to go into the side view here, hit Alt-Z. We can select all these faces that were created on the sides. Press X, delete faces. All right. And these top ones as well, these little extra edges we created, we can just get rid of those if we want it to round out more on the top, basically. So we just go through and get a hold of those if you can. Sometimes they're hard to see them, right? You can always press L on something and press H in edit mode as well. So you can select it and just hide it real quick. We gotta do the tops and the bottoms. And we've got quite a few more in here I'm sure I did not see or get rid of. Pretty sure I missed something. Yeah, this one here. And by the looks of it, I think we're okay now. We're good with that. So let's see if it's still arrays, and it does appear so. Sometimes there'll be a little bit of a discrepancy here that's like unavoidable. I don't know why it does it, but when we do a simple deform, it doesn't always work out quite perfectly or something like that. So anyways, we got this all kind of set up this way. And when it subdivides, it'll look more like so. You can see it's not, maybe perfect, unfortunately. We can still go through, we can still tweak this thing a little bit, if we needed to. We run into with this is that it's hard to sometimes get the thicknesses to stay correct. You'll have to tweak it a little bit. And just, eyeball it basically. So, but close enough, right? It looks about right. So here's the thing. We are going to turn this into the ring. So all we're going to do that is we're going to use a simple deform. Because of the way we modeled this one, if we go ahead and put it on the Z axis and set it to bin, I know I can wrap this thing up with without using an empty, but a lot of times you have to use an empty. This modifier list add-on I'm using, you can create empties by hitting this button, but if you don't have that, you have to select your object, Shift S, do cursor to selected, and then create your empty at the exact same position, basically. So you should have 1s and 0 or 0 rotations and well, you don't necessarily have to have 0 rotations, but you need to have 1 scales, and then your empty needs to be 1 scale as well. The rotation, as long as the rotation of the base object and the empty match, you should be okay. But you'll find a lot of times you have to rotate empties either on X or Y or Z by 90 degrees, then go back to your simple deform modifier and toggle between the different axes here to see which ones you can get to work to get it to bend right. In rare occasions, you might rotate on, like, say, X and Z or Y and Z or any combination like that to get those things to work. So as you play around with that more, you'll start to understand how it works out, and it's not too bad of a process. All right, so we're going to bump the array count up real quick, and you'll see it starts turning into the ring. Now we do have one little slight issue here, and that is in this area. You see it doesn't merge together. All right, so the array has merge options. It has a first and last even, but it doesn't work on this in this particular area. So what we can do is we can go through this. After the array, we can add a weld modifier, and we'll stick that weld modifier up there, and we might have to bump up the amount here a little bit. Oh, maybe it's not right there. Maybe it's no, excuse me. We have to do simple deform after the array, then the weld. And so now we should be able to bump up that amount just a tiny bit. See, there's like a slight discrepancy to it. If we did model this close enough, we shouldn't have any major issues with it. And that should be pretty good to go. So all in all, you know, we've pretty much recreated this thing. Now we could finesse it some more and add some additional loop cuts to make this look a little bit more rounded, because obviously it is a little flat. But for the most part, we got it, I'd say, most of the way there. And so that's all I'm going to do on this video anyways, is we're going to leave it at that. And it should be quite okay. It should be good. But if you want to round these out a little bit more, obviously you can just grab these segments and we can round them out. You do that on the back side maybe as well, so you get a little bit more of a rounding effect, right? So next time you look at it, grab those and pull them out on Y as needed, reposition if needed, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't know why it just became weird here on these ones, but it did. Let's try that again. Oh, I didn't grab all of them apparently. That could be a problem, I guess. Let's grab all of them and pull them out. All right, so there, it didn't do it that time. Much nicer. All right, guys, so that's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed, and you know, for just a little finishing effect here, give it a material and go to surface, make it metallic, drop the roughness a bit perhaps, and you can see, you know, silver, by the way, is very close to pure white, and that's kind of where we're at by default. So you can see it works out quite well. If you want to make it match more, you can do that, and of course change your HDRIs to something that reflect this kind of environment a little bit more perhaps. And I think you get the idea there. All right, ambient occlusion on as well, it helps. So yeah, that's it for modeling this. Hope you enjoyed, and I'll check you out on the next one. All right, take care.